year 1993, in the small village of Altınova, in the Kurdish majority city of Muş province, a tragedy unfolded. On the night of October 3rd, the house of the Oğut family was set on fire. Inside were parents Nasır and Eşref, along with their 7 children: Sevda, Sevim, Mehmet Shakir, Mehmet Shirin, Aykan, Cihan, and Çinal. The youngest was just 2 years old, the oldest only 14. All 9 perished, including a pregnant mother. Only one member of the family, Aysel Oğut, survived. This is the story of the Vartinis Massacre. Let's uncover this tragedy. 1993 was one of the most violent years in modern Turkey. The conflict between the Turkish state and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, had escalated to new levels. Entire Kurdish villages were caught between the army and guerrilla fighters. Thousands of homes were destroyed, and families were forced to abandon their land. Vartinis, or Altınova, was one of these villages living under constant pressure. The military presence was heavy, and suspicion of aiding the PKK often meant harassment for ordinary civilians. On October 2nd, just one day before the massacre, soldiers entered Vartinis and opened fire on shops in the village. According to survivor testimony, Captain Bülent Karaoğlu, the local gendarmerie commander, was overheard saying that the village would be burned that very night. When her father, Nasır, returned home with this news, he tried to calm his family. "I have not harmed the state," he told them. "Why would they harm me?" But the next night, his house and everyone inside would be turned to ash. In the early hours of October 3rd, 1993, Vartinis was shaken awake by gunfire. Soldiers surrounded the Oğut family home, cutting off any chance of escape. Inside were Nasır and Eşref, with their 7 children, ranging in age from 2 to 14. From her uncle's house nearby, 17-year-old Aysel Oğut heard the shots. She tried to reach her family, but soldiers pointed their rifles at her and forced her back inside. Moments later, flames began to rise from her father's home. Aysel recalls, "We heard screams coming from the house. Then the soldiers swore at us and pushed us back inside. 10 minutes later, my father's home was burning. They waited outside and did not let anyone escape. By morning, word spread through the village. Nasır, his wife Eşref, their 7 children, and even the unborn baby Eşref was carrying, were gone. The Oğut family had been turned to ash." When the flames died down, silence fell over Vartinis. At first, Aysel believed her family had been forced out of the house before it was set ablaze. But by morning, the truth reached her. Nasır and the children turned into ash. The entire village had witnessed what happened. Neighbors saw soldiers standing guard outside, making sure no one could leave the burning house. For Aysel, the loss was unbearable. At just 17, she had lost her parents, her 7 siblings, and even the unborn baby her mother carried. She later recalled locking herself in a room for months, unable to speak to anyone, her life consumed by grief. The house where the Oğut family perished would remain a scar on the village for decades. In 2016, it was turned into a small memorial, a silent reminder of the night an entire family was erased. The nightmare didn't end with the fire. For the next 3 decades, Aysel Oğut fought to see justice done. She filed a complaint stating that soldiers had deliberately set her family's home ablaze, but the Diyarbakır State Security Court initially closed the case, citing unknown perpetrators. After legal reforms in 2003, the case was reopened in 2013. An indictment accused Bülent Karaoğlu, the Haskoy District Gendarmerie Commander, along with several other officers, of ordering the massacre. For security reasons, the trial was moved from Muş to Kırıkkale in 2015. In 2016, all defendants were acquitted. The Court of Cassation later overturned part of the ruling, citing evidence that Karaoğlu had threatened to burn the village. Arrest warrants and red notices were issued, but he never appeared in court. Finally, on December 4, 2023, the Kırıkkale First High Criminal Court dismissed the case, ruling that there was no conclusive evidence of political, racial, or religious intent. As a result, the killings could not be classified as crimes against humanity under Turkish law at the time. The court also applied the statute of limitations, which had expired, closing the case once and for all. ISIL appealed the decision through her lawyer, citing European Court of Human Rights precedents that such atrocities should never be subject to time limits. She continues to fight, demanding accountability for the soldiers who destroyed her family. But even 30 years later, justice remains out of reach. The handling of the Vartinis case was condemned by the pro-Kurdish Dem Party, who called it yet another example of how the justice system protects perpetrators instead of Kurdish victims. In Parliament, Dem Deputy Cyrus Akak voiced that frustration publicly.
Yıl 1993, Muş milletvekiliyim. Sabaha karşı bir telefon aldım. Muş Vartinis beldesinde bir gün öncesinden bir operasyon olmuş. Orada bir güvenlik güçlerinden biri, bir de PKK militanı yaşamını yitirmiş. Operasyona katılan askerler beldeden geçerken belde halkını tehdit ederler. Ölümden ölüm beğenin, akşam burada olacağız derler ve çekip giderler. Gecenin geç saatinde araçlarla gelirler, askeri araçlarla gelirler. Köy halkını topluca alana toplarlar ve sonrası evleri ateşe verirler. Orada Nasır Öğün ve ailesi, şu gördüğünüz bu tablo, Nasır Öğün eşi hamile, 7 çocukları diri diri yakılır. Ve sonrası bizi aradılar. Böyle bir vahşetin olduğunu söylediler. Ben de o dönem Sayın Cumhurbaşkanlığı, Başbakanı ve ülkenin bütün yetkili birimlerini tek tek aradım. Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi İnsan Hakları İnceleme Komisyonu'nu da aradım ve durumu izah ettim. Bana olay yerine gideceklerini söylediler ama ne hikmetse 1 saat sonra arayıp gidemeyeceklerini söylediler. Çünkü Ankara'nın derinliklerinden talimat almışlardı ve gitmediler. Ben gittim. Kendi ellerimden o çocukların cesetlerini çıkardım ve o cesetleri toprağa gömerek geldik. O gün bugündür bizim hukuk arayışımız devam ediyor. Aileyle, avukatlardan, milletvekili arkadaşlarımızla bu hukuk mücadelesini sürdürüyoruz. Ama bugün 30 yıllık süre doldu.
Ahmet Yildirim, the former mayor of Muş, was among those who publicly condemned how the Vartinis case was handled.
Çok yanılmak isterdim ama buraya gelirken ülkenin son sadece 3-4 gündeki siyasi atmosferine binaen böyle bir katliamın, böyle bir kirli öldürme biçiminin cezasız kalacağını çok iyi biliyordum. Çünkü ülkenin en tepesinde 78 milyon insanı ve devleti temsil eden kişinin, en yüksek hukuk organının, Anayasa Mahkemesi'nin kararını tanımadığını söyleyen bir cumhurbaşkanı var iken buradan hukuka uygun, vicdana, ahlaka uygun bir kararın çıkmasını beklemiyordum ben. Çok yanılmak isterdik. Çünkü Anayasa Mahkemesi'nin kararını tanımayan bir cumhurbaşkanı 78 milyon insanın yasalara ve anayasaya riayet etmesini nasıl bekler anlayabilmiş değilim. Şu ülke demokratik ve özgür bir ülke olsaydı, sadece 9 tane koyun diri diri yakılmış olsaydı, 9 tane koyunun diri diri yakılmış olmasının hesabı sorulurdu. Bunun bile adalette, yargıda, yasada bir müeyyidesi vardır. Ama buna karşılık üzülerek ifade edelim, 9 insanın diri diri yakılması sadece Kırıkkale Adalet Sarayı'nın duvarına çarpmış olabilir.
30 years have passed since that night in Vartinis, but the memory of the massacre continues to haunt the Kurdish community. 9 members of the Oğuz family, children, parents, and an unborn baby were taken in an instant, leaving a village and a people grieving. For Kurdish families in Muş and across the region, Vartinis is more than a tragedy. It is a symbol of the injustices faced by their communities during decades of conflict. Villages were destroyed, homes burned, and generations traumatized. Yet their stories are often overlooked. ISIL Oğuz's struggle is also the struggle of her people, a fight to make the world acknowledge what was done, to defend their rights, and to preserve the memory of those who were silenced. Her persistence reminds the Kurdish community that remembering, documenting, and demanding justice is a form of resilience. The Vartinis Massacre is a story of loss, but also of endurance. It calls on all of us to honor Kurdish victims of state violence, to recognize the historical injustices, and to ensure that such tragedies are never forgotten.